her experience was incredibly cathartic. It was 3 days of purging and crying and just this incredible, very cathartic experience. And, she came back and she's like, this was just life changing. And I trust her judgment 100%. And I'm like, literally, where do I sign? Like, and I'm not an impulsive person. I research all of my decisions. I have an anxiety disorder, so a lot of that comes into it because I trust in her, but I also know that I was at a point where something had to change and it had to change quickly.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Master Plant Talk. I am Tyler Hurst of Microdose Yoga, your host, and today I am joined by Dianna. Dianna, can you tell us who you are and what makes you come alive?
Hi there. My name is Diana, and I think what makes me come alive the most is being out in nature. I love to hike. I love Arizona. I love the Southwest. So wherever I've been, I have amazing views and enjoy that time and like the company of my dog when I do it.
That's fantastic. What type of dog do you have?
She is an Anatolian Shepherd mix, so she's about
Okay,
85 pounds and loves to hike.
we're definitely gonna, I will definitely have to look that up because I know what the shepherd part is. I don't know what the other first part is, so we'll make sure to look that up later. So, Dianna, you have been watching or listening to the podcast, not watching it. You've been listening to it, and you had have a fantastic ayahuasca story. So, do you want to just start with sort of your premise for what happened to you in ayahuasca? Because you have some pretty good theories about how all this works. So, I'd love to hear about your experience. You can start either with what you were going to work on or the experience itself. The floor is yours.
Oh, thank you. Yes, it was an amazing experience. It was actually pretty life-changing in a way that I don't feel was as dramatic as some of the other participants on your podcast, but it was definitely very life-changing for me. Um, the reason why I sought out the ceremony was at that point in my life, I was going through some really tough times. I was in a very toxic work environment. I was having a lot of challenges with that. And it all stemmed back from essentially a persistent feeling in my lifetime of not being safe.
Okay.
And
Okay.
as we spoke, I have been in many different traditional and some of untraditional mental health settings before. I've sought help for this lack of safety. And one of the most concrete examples I can share with you where I don't have never felt safe is it's when I've been driving. And as you know, in Phoenix, you're driving 60, 70, 85 miles an hour on the freeway. And then all of a sudden, you are not, you're stopped. And that was a very terrifying situation for me. I would actually go into panic attack. It was not a road rage situation. I was not mad at the people around me, but I was terrified I was going to get rear-ended and killed, which I think is actually reinforced because that's true.
Yeah.
That could happen.
Yeah.
But it was so disproportionate to the situation. And I had struggled with that kind of the entire time I had been driving. But even before that, I look back and as a child, I would have panic attacks. I could have very easily been diagnosed with like a generalized anxiety disorder, probably also a few other things like OCD and ADHD. But I had gone through therapy to help me with this at one point in my
Could I ask
life.
really quick? Could I ask really quick? Okay, so you've had this feeling since you were a child, for as long as you remember. I'm assuming as long as you can remember. And so it
Yes,
sounds like you from what we talked about is that whenever your forward progress is stopped, like you're going somewhere or you think you're supposed to get somewhere and you're prevented from getting to wherever it is, whether that's a physical feeling or a mental feeling or an emotional feeling. So
correct.
when did you first start realizing you needed help for it, and what was that therapy like?
Well, like a lot of people, I myself, I didn't realize I needed help for it. So I ended up going to therapy for something else, and this is kind of what
Okay.
came up, but they were all very
And
connected.
was that in your adulthood, teenage years? Like how early did you start?
It was in my early adult. It was probably in my early to mid 20s, probably 23 to 26-ish range. And I went to a therapist who did a type of hypnosis work.
Okay. Okay.
And so through that hypnosis, that's where this lack of safety kind of really really granulized for me. Like I was able to really understand it in a different context. And it was, more about the lack of safety. And one of the things that came out during that hypnosis was that I had a very different type of birth. And this is one of the things that I think is thematic throughout my life. My mom had two miscarriages prior to having me. So that was horribly traumatic for her. My father, this was back in a time in the late 60s, early 70s, where that miscarriage just, there was no context for dealing with that,
Okay. Right. It was
particularly
just
for,
a horrible tragedy, and there was no way to deal with it. Okay. Yeah.
yeah. And in fact, my mom has told me that the doctor was like, don't worry about it, just get pregnant again. And so there was no awareness of kind of the trauma that a mother would go through or that a father would go through with losing a child in that manner. And my mom's miscarriages were late also, which is even more horrific. And she finally ended up going to a doctor who diagnosed her with what's called an incompetent cervix. And so basically, the elasticity just doesn't renew. And the way at that point in time that they resolved this was to sew an elastic ring.
So, like a
Yeah,
piece of elastic
correct.
to her uterus to keep it closed, I guess, or
Exactly.
almost closed. Wow. Okay.
That's exactly correct. And so when I was
Jesus.
being born, my birth had to stop so that the doctors could go in and remove that elastic ring in order for the baby, which was me, to be born.
Yeah. So
And
you were stuck in
so
the birth canal for a while.
I was stuck at the birth
Okay.
canal. You can start to see
Okay.
how this connects, right?
Yeah.
And
Right.
so, and I don't know how long I was there. My mom was under anesthesia. She can't tell me, the hospital records are gone because I actually tried to look for those hospital records at one
Yeah.
point in time because I was
Yeah.
very curious. And so my birth was halted and contractions were not. So, as you can imagine, I was trapped in the birth canal with contractions still happening. So it felt like, I'm sure, I have no awareness of that in a cognizant way, but I'm confident that it felt like a life or death situation. And
Yeah.
I believe for me, what happened was that lizard part of your brain, that
Uh-huh.
fight or flight amygdala, it got primed to where whenever I was either literally or perceptually stopped in my forward progress, it felt like I was going to die. And I even remember when I was sitting in a car, stopped in traffic, feeling that panic attack that I would say out loud. I would articulate, I'm going to die. We're going to die. And it was,
God.
that's a disproportionate reaction, clearly. But I think
Yeah.
for me, it all goes back into this space where I got chemically primed to
Hmm.
believe that that was going to be life threatening.
So, first of all, wow, my God. So, does this manifest also if you're like walking along and someone grabs your arm? Like, do you know, or is that something you recall? Or is it only specific situations maybe where you're not in control of the situation? Like, you have to be like maybe in a car, not necessarily walking by yourself. Do you know, is there a difference between the two?
I think there's a difference of degrees. The anxiety was always there. There was a panicked kind of response, a disproportionate response whenever that would happen. And, even in doing tasks, if I was in school, I can remember being in those horrible timed tests where you were like, you have 3 minutes to do 15 math problems.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
was like, that was a massive panic situation for me. And then if I didn't finish, it was like kind of this full blown meltdown. And I think in today's world, I would have been diagnosed with all sorts of behavioral problems as a kid.
Right.
Back then, they were
ADHD.
kind of
Yeah. Yeah.
bipolar, it's
Okay. Yeah.
autism, I'm sure, at some
Yeah.
point. And at that point in time, you were just kind of like the weird kid, kind of in the corner of the room. They didn't really know how to deal with you, and neither did my family, quite frankly. So, from my experience through ayahuasca, and that was one of the intentions I set. going down there to the ceremony was I wanted to feel safe.
Let's pause and we're going to come right back to that. So please stick there. So in your early 20s, you went and got therapy and you had this hypnosis done. And that brought
Yes,
up this, not memory, but this happening of your birth.
correct.
What did they recommend that you do after that? Did they recommend CBT, EMDR? Did they recommend some sort of psych meds? Because they clearly, obviously, I'm sure they didn't have a pill for, freaking out because you're literally stuck and might die. But I'm wondering, like, how did they diagnose, or was there a diagnosis?
I am confident there was a diagnosis because I was using my
Okay.
health insurance at the time, and that's
Okay.
what you have to do.
Yeah.
And so I think my diagnosis was generalized anxiety disorder.
General anxiety.
And so, as part of that, and good question, because the recommendations were very kind of traditional recommendations, start doing meditation, think about yoga, breath work, mindfulness, all of that,
Yeah.
which is fantastic. It works
Yes.
really well. And all of it took a piece of that response down. Like the more I would practice mindfulness or breath work, those kinds of things, it would take a piece down. The anxiety would reduce incrementally,
But
but it would
nothing ever
never
really got rid of it. And
it
you
would
still
never
had to
go
use
away.
and you still had to use energy. You still had to do all these things in order to keep on fixing. Like it's like I'm not going to say meditation's a band-aid, but in this case, it was a good band-aid, but it sort of
Mhm.
was. You still had to expend all the mental energy in order to like, hey, I'm freaking out. Now I need to calm myself down. Okay, well, how do I do that? It was still there no matter what you did.
Yes, and it was still disproportionate to the situation.
Yes. Yes.
It never got me to what would be reasonable in my mind,
Okay. Okay.
where you could have this situation and not feel like you were going to go into a panic attack. The therapist that I was working with at that point in time did not recommend medication because that was not something I was going to really be willing to do. I have, no, I think that works for a lot of other people, but I wasn't really interested in taking any kind of that anxiety or antidepressant medication. And for 99% of the things I was doing in my life, I was perfectly functional in that setting. And this was very specific. And then I actually had, through this therapist, had gone into working through holotropic breath work and
Okay.
had done quite a few,
And this was in the 90s, right? Or 2000s? Like when was this
probably
sort
early
of
2000s. Yeah.
so you started on the therapy in the late 90s and then you started to do this holotropic thing in the early 2000s-ish, somewhere around there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And did quite a few sessions of the holotropic breath work, but those were extremely long. It was really intense. I had some amazing experiences out of that. And very much something that I'll carry with me forever. And it did impact this anxiety, this feeling of safety in very positive ways, like again, incrementally reducing. But what I found was that in periods of extreme stress and periods of, difficulty in other areas, that anxiety would always increase. My responses
Okay.
would always go back to that
Right.
disproportionate panic attack.
So how often were you doing these breathwork sessions? I mean, if you're not on medication, you probably would need to do them. I mean, was it like a weekly thing, monthly? Like how often were they being done?
I believe it was every month for like a weekend, like a Friday night, Saturday morning. And it was a group and it was wonderful. It was a really neat experience in a lot of ways. And, the community that was part of that group was really nice to have. And it just became something where the benefit was not outweighing the time involvement and commitment. And I just kind of my life shifted and it just didn't fit in
Okay.
anymore.
Okay.
As we do, I just started living my life and knowing this was still a challenge for me and
So
still working through.
how did you respond? So let's say you're done doing holotropic breath work, you started to for a while. And how many years about did you do that? Early
It
2000s
was
until
probably a year, maybe 18 months. It really wasn't
a year,
that
18 months.
long.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's still pretty long, but or not long in context for sure. So you just basically started to just live your life. What did you do when you had these episodes? And I'll call them episodes. I don't like to say freaking out. I say that colloquially because I'm okay with that because I call that when I call them episodes for me. So when you had these responses to or
Okay.
out of proportions, like what did you do to help bring yourself down? Did you just leave? Did you scream? Did you yell? Did you sit there until it went away? Like what happened?
Yes. Yeah. Sometimes there was screaming, and that's a release. It's a cathartic release.
Yep.
And there was a
Yep. It's great.
screaming, swearing might have been involved. And then it was going back to that, trying to get to that centered and that breath and the self-talk, and having conversations quietly or out loud, this isn't life-threatening, you're going to be fine, you're going to be safe. Kind of those CBT kind of techniques where, you do that self-talk. If I could avoid it, I was going to avoid it, but you can't. I think that kind of awareness of this is not something that is going to kill me in this particular moment. And that sounds overly dramatic, but that's actually what it felt like. It
Oh,
felt like I was going to actually die in that moment.
yeah, I mean that's it. I mean the what I'm familiar with is complex PTSD, which I think has bits of roots in almost all mental illnesses for various reasons. But yeah,
Hmm.
I don't think people really understand when these small things happen, getting stuck in traffic, which doesn't seem like a big deal, and you think you really think you're going to die. Like you're not making that up. Like your brain is telling you I'm going to die. So how long did it take you? Let's say you get sorry to bring this back up. I'm sure you can talk about it. How long would it take you to calm yourself down after being worked up? Like, would you get it down to like 5 minutes or was it like 15 to 30 to 60 minutes every single time? Like, what was that energy expenditure and time requirement like?
That's a good question. I'm not really sure I've ever thought about how long, but it wasn't quick. A lot of times, and my heart rate would still be high, still be in that kind of fight or flight response for a while. And
So
sometimes that would
you
last.
never got the point of where you could just say, I'm okay. And then after a couple minutes, come back to breath. You had to do a whole bunch of stuff and then sit in it for 45 minutes, an hour, 2 hours with all that type of thing. It never came to the point of where you could just shut it off. You could never control it that much. Not that anyone can. Okay.
No, I couldn't. For me, it didn't work that fully. Sometimes it would be the entire car ride. Sometimes it would be the entire situation that I might be dealing with in a personal or a professional setting,
Okay. Okay.
where I was having to regulate through the whole meeting. I was having to regulate through the whole trip. I was having to regulate through the whole situation. And that's where a lot of that practice of that mindfulness does help because I could manage that situation. There were times where I could feel the panic rising, even though I was centered and breathing. So I
Right.
might start, essentially like trying to pinch myself to keep myself focused
Yeah,
on
you were
not,
like stimming almost a little bit, like
yes,
stimming, sort of just a self-regulation.
yes, exactly. So that would, keep me focused sometimes, keep me from picking up and running out of the room,
Right.
essentially,
Right.
and
Right.
trying to maintain focus as well and not get lost in the emotion of it.
And so all this time you're working in the wellness health industry at the time, and you're working in, I'm assuming, corporate environments. So you are sort of suffering, maybe not the right word. You're dealing with this malady for decades. You just sort of sweat it out and then it sort of goes away for a little while and then it comes back. You just keep on this cycle for a while, I'm assuming, right?
Yes. Yeah. Years,
Okay.
really.
Okay.
And it
Okay.
would ebb and flow depending
Of
on the
course.
particular situation, depending on the external stressors. But yes, it was a lifetime, really.
Okay. Okay. And then did you ever have to like leave jobs or move or completely change your life when you realized like, hey, my self-regulation practices can't even handle this. I have to do something else because I can't regulate myself without help.
There were a couple of times where I had to do that. I had been in a couple of very toxic work environments where there was a lot of bullying, there was a lot of gaslighting, there was just a really problematic work environment. And I think regardless of what's going on, you probably should think about what your next
Yeah, of
steps
course, of
are.
course. Just your responses
Yes.
your responses were to another level than most people's responses. Yeah, yeah.
Yes. And some people can manage to disassociate from those environments to the point where they can manage it for a long time. I'm not one of them. And so it was a situation where when I was in those work environments, um, I would carry it home with me. I would struggle in the work environment, and a lot of that around still for me centered around that safety. It was not safe to be in that work environment. It was consistent with the other triggers for me when I was in those spaces.
Were there any other triggers besides the feeling of either being trapped or your forward momentum being paused, or was there like raised voices or certain sounds or anything like that that also could bring about a response or an episode or whatever we want to call it?
Yes. In fact, sound is one of those triggers for me, like
Oh,
overwhelming sounds. I get overwhelmed by
okay,
sound really easily if there's a lot of
okay.
competing sounds. If people are arguing in a room and there's noise in the hallway or there's a radio on or something like that, a lot of times I can't focus on what you're saying to me if there's other distractions.
Do you have that with do you have that with music, like with music too? Like if there was music playing right now, would you have trouble talking to understanding what I was saying? Oh,
Yes.
so it's okay. So that's like an auditory processing something.
And I can hear you and I can comprehend what you're
Yes,
saying, but it just becomes
yes,
very overwhelming.
yes, yes.
The more stimulus that's in an area, the more overwhelming it becomes for me.
Yeah. And so
So like
that just sounds exhausting, like
pretty
every
hard way to
day.
navigate the world. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for the most part, I was able to do that and function at a fairly high level. But you're right. Thank you. It was really exhausting. And that's one of the things. And I think over the years, the concept of psychotropic medications has come up. And I am just resistant to that for me. I'm very sensitive to things that I put in my body, caffeine. I'm incredibly sensitive to caffeine. And so for me, and seeing people that have been on psychotropic medications, and I think it does wonders for a lot of people, but the side effects are a big concern for me. Some of the chemical compounds are a big concern. The experimenting stage where you are going through different dosage to see what works for you is a
Is
big concern for me.
rough. It's rough. Yeah.
And
And so,
I've,
and you knew all
yeah,
about this because you worked in a aligned industry that you understood this both from a emotional level personally, but you also stood up from an intellectual level. Like you knew what went into all of this, not just, like I said, not just personally, but professionally, right?
yes, yes. And I had seen people really suffer with the challenges with psychotropic medications and the regulatory phase where we're trying to get that dosage correct. And it was just something I was not interested for me. I did try herbal, um, remedies to assist with anxiety in those peak times where there was a lot of stressors going on, and everything worked to a point. It would either lose its efficacy after multiple doses, or it just wouldn't seem to take enough of the response down. It was still a struggle.
And was that, and so were you in a relationship this time and a family kid? Did you have kids? Have kids?
I
How
no.
how was your responses, or did they sort of see it? Was like mom or your wife was known as just, yeah, she just sort of has a thing sometimes. Like how did they sort of see it happening to you? 'Cause I'm assuming they wanted to help you. They didn't know how.
Yes, and I didn't know how to help myself either.
Okay.
So that's a
Okay.
piece of
Yeah.
it. I was doing everything I was trained to do. I was everything that people had taught me
Right.
to do.
Right.
I have a really close, incredible network of friends, and they all knew that was just part of what happens. We would talk about it, and they would see the panic attacks occasionally. They knew, I was open with them. I was going to therapy. I was working on this from all of the techniques that I had learned, and these were things that just continued to happen.
And you fortunately didn't turn down the road of alcohol or anything like that, or was that, or did you try that for a little while? Did you try a glass of wine or two or something like that to see if that would help as well?
It's interesting. Yeah. So my family has a lot of alcoholics in it. So I'm super aware of that. I can drink and I can drink socially, but again, with the way that my body metabolizes alcohol, it doesn't, I don't think I get the same effects that a lot of other people do. And so, but that was the most recent time in my life where this was really problematic. And I was in this very bad work environment. I truly thought, I get it now. I get why people numb with drugs and alcohol. Like I had never, I don't think for me, I had fully appreciated why people would choose that route. I knew they did. I never judged them for
Yeah.
that. I
Yep.
applaud sobriety, but I had never been in a period of my life, and I had had many other tragedies, but I had never been in a period of my life where I wanted to numb myself so completely for extended periods of time to where I fully understood why people do that now. And I think that was part of the gift that I was given for going through this really challenging time was I got more insight into why people would choose to, drink alcohol to excess and just numb themselves out or shoot heroin and just numb themselves out to the world.
Yeah. I remember being taught that, it's because they're bad people or they're addicts or whatever else. It's like, no, they just don't want to hurt anymore. Like, that's it. They just don't want to hurt. They're not doing it
And
for
that
fun or to get high, even though getting high sometimes is a little bit of a bright little light in a dark world. But yeah, they just want to feel normal, really. So you grow, you become an adult, you have a family, you have a spouse, you are successful in your business or in your field. Maybe not as successful as you would have liked to have been because you haven't expended a lot of emotional energy just to deal with stuff. What made you think that, hey, what I'm doing may not be or isn't enough? I already know that. Maybe it's time to turn to a plant medicine. What made you start to think about that possibility?
I think I got to this real serious crisis point, and I had to sit with myself and say, something has to change. I wasn't sleeping. I had lost over
Mm.
20 pounds.
Oh,
I was almost to the point sometimes where I was hallucinating. I was becoming very paranoid just from the stress and the environment. At this point in my life, I sought therapy again and was working with a very good therapist and, was walking through all of this with that person. And we were talking about this is a point where, again, I don't want to start drinking to numb this. I don't want to start doing other drugs to numb this. Psychotropic medication is a possibility. It's a real possibility. And I was walking really closely up to what would I be willing to take and talking to this therapist about like what are the options now? What would it look like? How would we go about getting that prescription? And a very, very, very close friend of mine had gone and done a ceremony for her own situation, and it was very different than mine. And she came back, and as soon as she was telling me about it and what it was, I was like, nope, I'm in. That's it.
and so when was this? This was somewhat fairly recently, or was it years ago?
It was over this past summer, the summer of
Last
2024.
summer. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you've basically been dealing with this on your own for, let's say, well, upwards of 20 years, but professionally with professional help for 20 years. And you
Yeah.
finally came to the point of where you might be open to medication, possibly. And then it happened to this friend of yours went to a ceremony. And what was her experience? Like, what did she say? Like, what did she tell you?
Her experience was incredibly cathartic. It was 3 days of purging and crying and just this incredible, very cathartic experience. She came back and she's like, this was just life changing. And I trust her judgment 100%. And I'm like, literally, where do I sign? And I'm not an impulsive person. I research all of my decisions. I have an anxiety disorder, so a lot of that comes into it because I trust in her, but I also know that I was at a point where something had to change and it had to change
Okay.
quickly.
Now, did you have a conversation with her over the phone, or was this an in-person conversation? Because I'm curious if you noticed a shift in her, like maybe your body sort of saw that something was different, which made you intellectually be more open to trusting that type of thing.
Yes, it was an in person. It was very intense.
Okay.
She shared with me her
Okay.
entire experience. And you're right, there was a definite difference in visually you could see that this was a person who was changed, much more relaxed, much more focused, much more centered, much more grounded, um, and less caught up in everything that we get caught up in. Like I said, it was just something that had never occurred to me before until her experience. I didn't know that this existed here in Arizona, and it was literally not even a thought. It was, where do I sign? How do I
So
get
you
to do this?
so did you know about ayahuasca before this, but just dismissed it as I don't want to go to South America because I already have anxiety? Like, do you want me to travel to another country where I might not speak the language as well as they do? Did you know about ayahuasca before you talked to her, or was this completely out of the blue?
I knew about ayahuasca. I did not know a lot. I knew what it was. I knew it was a plant. I knew it had hallucinogenic properties. Beyond that, really didn't know much. Never thought of this as an option. It wasn't even the distance or the country. It was just never considered as an option. And I have never done any form of recreational drug outside of alcohol, not smoked a joint, not done marijuana, never done anything. So, coming from that perspective, this is a fairly large leap for
Yeah.
someone like me.
Yeah. I mean, my first psychedelic was ayahuasca, and I will tell you that was pretty rough's not the right word, but pretty like, oh my God, because I probably wouldn't have started with ayahuasca. Maybe I would have started with like mushrooms if I'd had the choice, but I was at a similar place in my life. It's like something has to change. What I'm doing isn't working, and I found this good vibe. So you went from, so call it straight-laced, I don't know, just call it, you didn't want to experiment with recreational drugs. It's no problem with that, to, oh my God, I have to try this. How long did it take you to sign up from talking to her in what, summer of 2024? Like, what was that process like? Did you sign up right away and were you immediately excited, or did it take a little bit of time to actually go in there and register? Talk about that process as far as your transition from, yes, I'm going to do it, to actually signing up and getting prepared to go.
If I remember right, I think she sent me the link through
Okay.
email
Yep.
and I signed up that night.
Oh my God.
It might have been 3 hours.
Okay. Okay. And then how long was your ceremony? Was it the next month or was it a couple weeks? I mean, it's pretty close.
I think it was about 2 to 3 weeks. It was the next one that was offered.
Okay. So you signed up for it. How did your body respond in, let's just say 2 weeks. Let's say it's 2 weeks. What was your response like to knowing you had just signed up to go sit with a bunch of strangers outside of Tucson using one of the world's most powerful psychedelic drugs? Like, were you anxious? I mean, were you more anxious than you normally are? Were you less anxious? Like, what was that period of those 2 weeks like before you even stepped into the Maloka?
It was probably one of the strangest things for me is I truly believe I was called to do it. And I hear you talk about that and I hear your other guests talk about it. From that point forward, when I made that decision and I signed on the dotted line, I was calm. It was the right thing at the right time for me. And, I started doing the preparation. I had to read all the information because I had no experience whatsoever. I did not look anything up on YouTube, and I've heard not to do that. Subsequently, I'm like, don't do that. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
but so I started the diet, was trying to adhere to that as best as possible. I got the tea. That was pretty much, kind of the biggest commitment that I did was the diet and the tea. And then what was so weird for me and through my life and my experience is, and somebody has said this to me subsequently, was Aya was talking to me from that point forward.
Hmm. Hmm.
And my drive from my house to Tucson, I don't remember it. I literally felt like I was being guided. There was a force outside of me that was taking me there. And I never thought about it. I didn't worry about it. There was no anxiety around the preparation and the trip. And,
Okay.
um,
And the trip is what, I mean, the trip that you're taking is a couple hours, 3, 4 hours to get to Tucson from where you are, maybe five-ish. So, I mean, it's a long trip, right?
it was a good long drive and never worried about a thing. It was all going to be fine. It's what it felt like, which that's very unusual. That is a very unusual experience for me to not overthink it, to not worry about it because of that anxiety that I've carried with me. Um, and, I never had a concern for my safety. Like, again, like you said, I was going to be in a room full of complete strangers going into, a state where I will not be in control and didn't worry. Just didn't, which is
This
surprising.
sounds like a weird thing to ask, but it's something that bothers me whenever I drive out to Tucson. Were there any traffic slowdowns on the way to Tucson, or do you not remember any?
I don't remember. I
Wow.
don't, honestly, I
Wow.
don't remember,
Wow.
but I'm sure there was.
Yeah, because they're
It's
all.
too,
That's my question. Because there always
yeah,
are,
yeah.
but you don't remember any of them. So clearly, you either disassociate harder than you ever have in your entire life, which sounds possible, but maybe a little unlikely because you were had a calling, a mission, or it just didn't bother you. Like Scott always has told me from the very beginning that ayahuasca starts working on you the second you make a commitment to go, right? And he says, stuff will happen on the way to ceremony. Someone will cut you off in traffic, or someone will pull up over here, and then you realize it's supposed to be this. And then later, 2 weeks after ceremony, you realize, oh my God, all this stuff was connected. And that sounds like what sort of happened to you is you got free passage, or at least a free of emotional responses passage to the Maloka without having to worry about the traffic, which, as we know, unless you went in the middle of the night, there was likely slowdowns
Hmm.
in at least one spot. Wow. Wow.
And even at that moment, like on that drive, I was aware of this and
Huh?
I was driving and feeling like there was something outside of me guiding this progress. I was talking to someone at the Maluka about this, and they're like, "Yep, that's how it happens." And I had
Huh.
no idea or concept, like you just said, that Scott had told you
No.
that it starts working the moment you make that commitment. I had no idea about it. So, but like you said, I had no awareness that Aya starts from the moment you make that commitment. I had no information about that, but that was
Okay.
definitely my experience.
Okay.
And so, when I got there, it was kind of just setting up and wandering around for a moment, laying down, just trying to get a feel for it.
When you first saw the Maloka, first saw the complex, first saw the Maloka, what was your emotional response to that? Was it, hey, I'm home, hey, I'm safe, hey, this is going to be fun, or was it just you just felt comfortable? Was there any sort of thing that really stuck out with you with that?
It was very comforting. The desert was beautiful. Being out in the middle of that space was remarkable. The Maloka itself was very pretty. Walking up, there were people that were greeting you, very friendly, very welcoming, very calm. Just a very
Okay.
calm setting for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're there at the Maloka. You do now. You spend the next couple hours just sort of settling in. What was your first night?
So, it was good in the sense that, again, I felt very safe. I was still very calm. I was kind of a little bit excited to see what would happen. But one of the things I had some reservations about was that I didn't want to have this unbelievably cathartic experience like my friend. That was not something I really wanted for me because honestly, I had so much in the past year that had happened that was deeply emotional. I was crying all the time, and I'm not one of those people, like I'm not a crier, I'm not that person. And I didn't feel like I really wanted that, but was open to it if it came. That was one of those things where if this was what I needed at this point in time, I guess we'll go through it and we'll see what happens. And so I took the first dose and nothing really happened. So, following the instructions, you could come up for a second one. And the second one, I took and went back and had quite frankly, a very lovely experience.
Okay.
Saw the snakes that
There you
were
go.
very colorful and not threatening and very pretty. Had gone outside a few times, was, looking at the stars, which were amazing in that location. Very calm, very gentle, and really kind of was just, I think, laying a blanket of safety. I saw images. I had a lot of very powerful but very positive experiences that first night.
Okay. And was there anything that really stood out for you? I mean, obviously you've talked about the snakes and all that colorful. Was there an emotion or anything that really stood out more than anything else? I mean, when you say powerful, I mean, I know what that means, but like, was there anything that like, did you feel a sense of calm, a sense of, did you feel courageous? Did you feel brave? Did you feel not anxious? Did you feel sure of yourself? Like, what was there anything like that you sort of not took away from it, but sort of like you remember it more than anything else?
I felt peace. And that
Mm.
was just like this overwhelming emotion that even when I woke up, I was at peace. I was at peace there. I was at peace with myself. And I just remember that the word just kept coming over and over and over again. It was just peace. It was just peace. Just this quiet, calm comfort.
So you have your first night. Do you have any purges you remember of? Or what did you sweat? Did you upward purge? Did you shake? Like anything like that?
Yeah, a little bit of upward purge, but then there was no, like, it wasn't cathartic. Like, my friend's experience was very physical. It was very physical for her. Mine was not, which is, I think, what I needed. I needed that comfort, kind of that holding in that space. I saw, uh, images that were very strong, but not threatening, protective, lots of kind of beauty in a lot of ways, a lot of colors, a lot of images that were very beautiful.
How was the music to your experience? Because I know when I go, some of the strings sort of a lot of times make me
Mhm.
not always cry, like I'm not sobbing, but there's tears coming down from my eyes. And some of the drums make my hips and my abdomen like want to move, like I'm not getting up and shaking like this, but I sort of want to writhe around a little bit. Did you have any reaction to any of the music or any of the sounds that were played?
Honestly, that was one thing I was not expecting was the music. And I think my friend forgot to tell me about it.
That's
And
gotta be a
maybe she
shock.
doesn't remember a lot of it. But it was so beautiful.
Yeah.
I was just blown away by the quality of the vocals, by the instruments, the people that were playing. Like it was otherworldly in many ways. And it was so beautiful. And what I was trying to do is kind of just breathe and live in the music, just be in that, let the music carry me and it was just so beautiful. I don't remember even wanting to move. I remember just being there and laying peacefully and quietly, and all this music was around me and through me. I remember you feeling it physically in your body, um, and just such an extreme experience of beauty, I think, for me.
Oh, that's cool. So you
Yeah.
just sort of, it sounds like you were flowing through the whole night. You had your first drink and not much happened, which is normal. And then you had your second drink and then stuff started to like, you know, take effect. Were you done? Like, was that it the rest of the night? Did you get up a bunch? Did you have to go to the bathroom a bunch? Did you walk around outside or were you just sort of on your mat in your experience for all night, even though it may have seemed like 2 hours to you? Do you remember anything
Yeah,
else?
I walked around a little bit, but not very often, not much. And then I was there just kind of laying, and I had one of the things I was advised to do is bring like an eye pat, like a
Yep.
mask.
Yep.
And so I
Yep.
had that. And like you're saying, it felt like it might have been 2 hours at the most. And when I woke up, it was bright. There was sunlight everywhere. I don't
Yeah.
know how long
Yeah.
it had been since
Yeah.
the end of the
Yeah.
ceremony, and I was so energized. Like I did not sleep through the entire weekend. I wanted to go out into the desert and just walk around and just be and sit in the sun and talk to people. That feeling of peace was just so inherent at that point that it was carrying no matter what happened. It was just with me. And I had a wonderful conversation with a couple of the people that were there and we shared our experiences. And one of the people that was there, he had just a tremendously transformative experience, which I was so happy for him. He was open to sharing that experience with me, and I wanted to receive that.
Sleep? You didn't sleep during the day the entire weekend? Is that what I just heard? You didn't sleep at all
Yes,
during the day?
did not sleep at all, which, yeah, I never felt like I needed to. It was there. I would lay down.
But just never, you just didn't feel the need to do it? Wow. There's a quote by Dr. Gabor Mate, who does a bunch of wisdom of trauma, a bunch of trauma-based type of stuff. And he has this quote, I might be paraphrasing it, but the end of it is, the energy of trauma can be transformed into the energy of life. Something like that. And so it sounds like that's sort of what happened, because all the energy you were using to keep yourself calm and to regulate yourself and to sort of just exist now may have been transferred into you just enjoying people, enjoying the desert, enjoying just being awake and alive and not in a state of anxiety is sort of what that sounds like.
I think it's a good description. Absolutely.
So you got up the next morning, you have apparently slept well during the night or meditated well or whatever it was. You have this bunch of great conversations. You try to go to sleep wherever you're staying. You don't sleep. You come back for the second night, correct? What was the second night like?
So the second night, I had the one dose and didn't have any kind of, again, catharsis at all. It was just another night, very peaceful. Had quite a few experiences, visions, saw a lot. It was very active visually. What's funny is, again, one of my intentions that I set was peace and safety. And so I got peace the first night. I got safety the second night. And what was funny is, because I think for me, Aya has a sense of humor. This was my experience because I have a kind of a funny sense of humor. So I would start having these beautiful hallucinations, seeing these gorgeous landscapes, just magical spaces. And, again, colors and beauty and just extraordinary. And it would stop. And I was like, okay, breathe, listen to the music, let the music doing the self-talk carry me through, so I would go back and I would start seeing just incredible. And again, nature is very important to me. I see these unbelievable landscapes, vivid colors, peaceful spaces, and it would stop. And I was
Interesting.
starting to get a little frustrated. I was like, is it the music? Do I need to go do another dose? And so it was just lie back and I was doing it. And I think it was the third, maybe the fourth time that this happened where I was just about to get into this, what I would think would be full body experience into this space. And I was like, okay, that's enough. I'm getting really frustrated. And I heard this voice. And it was a woman's voice saying, this is what you need to learn. You're safe. And it goes
Wow.
back to when my forward progress is stopped.
Huh?
That's when the feeling of safety is disrupted. And I laughed and the voice laughed and she was like, no,
Right.
this is it. This is your lesson. This is what you need to learn. You're safe.
Wow. So it was showing you these things and then stopping them, and then showing you things and stopping them to show you that even when your forward momentum is stopped, you're still, oh, wow, that's some smart medicine right there. I'll tell you that, or spirits, whatever you want to call that. So he was basically like helping you. It was showing you, like it was literally just there showing you.
Mm-hmm.
And then, do you remember, like, was the
Mm-hmm.
voice, was the voice someone you recognized, or was it a completely new voice to you?
To me, it was a completely new voice. It was not anybody I recognized. And I knew it was Aya. I knew it was
Okay.
Aya,
Yep.
Aya talking to me. And I had seen images the first night that I believe were the way that I would perceive, a physical form. And so it was very clearly Aya speaking to me saying, you are safe. This is the lesson you needed to.
Wow. That must have been, I mean, that must have, both feeling it and being told it must have been really helpful for you.
It was really helpful. Yeah, it was really
Wow.
helpful.
Wow. So, and you only had one drink that night. That was it. That was just,
Mhm.
and so no purging the second night. Just, it was just the lessons.
It was just the lessons. It was very gentle, which, as you've said, and people have said to me, it doesn't give you any more than you can handle. And I
Yeah.
was in a very
Yeah.
fragile space
Right.
prior
Right.
to going. And so I didn't need these dramatic, cathartic lessons. I needed someone to be very gentle and very loving and very compassionate. And that is exactly what I got.
Right. Right. You didn't need to scream and wail. And you didn't need a room to scream and wail. You needed someone just to hold you and pat your head or whatever the equivalent of that was. So
Yes.
that is cool. So you wake up You wake up Sunday morning now. So you've gone through a night of peace and a night of safety. What's the world like on
Mhm.
Sunday morning? Is it different than I mean, it's definitely different than it was Friday morning. Is it different than it was Saturday morning? Is it a huge shift? I mean, are you seeing things differently, or are you just noticing you're not an absence of things that used to be there, right? Like, is there anything new, or is it more just an absence of old, well, trauma would be the right word for
I think it was more the latter. It was more of an absence of everything.
it. Okay.
And I was very comforted. I felt very loved, very safe, very cared for. And the next day I woke up and I was like, no, I'm good. I just want to go home. This has been it for me. I'm good right now. And I had intended to stay 3 days. And at the end of that, I was like, no, I think it's time for me to go.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
felt good about that. I've not regretted that. I sat with it for hours and I was like, you want to stay, you plan to stay. All of my intentions had been to stay that next day. And I talked to some folks and I sat with it for several hours and I left and I went to get something to eat. And I was like, no, I think I'm good.
Wow. Wow. So you packed up your stuff and you drove back a couple hours home. What was the
Mhm.
drive like?
It was, it was very peaceful
I mean,
and
you don't
it's
remember
hard to
any
describe.
traffic slowdowns, obviously. I'm
No.
floored by this because I remember them every
Yeah.
single. I just went to Tucson yesterday, so I remember every single
Yeah.
one.
The drive back was fine, but it's funny that you say that. Because the very next day that I had to go back to my work life,
Yeah. Yeah.
the very next day, same thing, same time, on the 60 in traffic, 70 miles an hour to nothing. And I didn't have the reaction.
Way.
First time in my
First time in your
entire
life.
life, first time in my life, I was totally cognizant of it. And I heard her say again, see, you're safe.
So
Unreal.
at this point, I know you've taken ayahuasca. Are you thinking like, my God, there's a voice talking to me, and I'm cool with that? Like, were you, for someone who's never done any drugs before? Like, was this voice scary? Or was it just always sort of been there and it's something that you're totally okay with? Like, how did you react to even hearing the voice outside of ceremony in the traffic? Like, what was that like?
It was fine. Like it wasn't scary. This was not a known voice. This is not like your mom's words coming at you. Like, are you
Yeah.
sure you're going to wear that? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
This was that
Yeah.
same voice, very calm, very comforting, very compassionate, just saying, see, you're okay. And I just started laughing because the relief was so complete. I just
Right.
started laughing.
Right. Has there have okay, so obviously this traffic thing is huge, especially living in the Phoenix, or even living in the Arizona, but especially the Phoenix area. That's huge. Has there been anything else that you've noticed that maybe is less of an issue now than it used to be besides just the traffic thing?
So funny thing, because I was thinking about this when we had the recording issues, right? And it stopped and I'm sitting there waiting and we're
Huh?
waiting and we're just trying to figure it
Huh?
out. And it goes to the point where I have to
Huh?
restart everything. And I'm like,
Uh-huh.
no panic. And it was funny because I was thinking in my head and I was kind of laughing. I was like, no, this is one of those examples. It's very concrete.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's like normally I would be in a panic and I'd be freaking out and I'd be trying to figure this out and just super stressed and worried about my impression that I might make on you and how you would perceive the events. And the self-talk would be like, oh, you're an idiot and this
Yeah.
is a
Yeah.
disaster. And I was like, nah, we'll figure it out. It'll work one way or
No,
another.
it's funny you
And
say that because
yeah,
a couple of years ago I would have had that exact same reaction to what just happened too. So I
yeah,
totally feel you on that because I was like, I could get mad, but we didn't do anything. Like, what are we going to do? We're just going to restart some things and just go from there. But like the feeling
mhm,
was never, I'm not even
mhm,
sweating, which is really strange too.
right.
That is, wow.
Yeah. And
Wow.
that's been kind of the experience pervasively is it's like I've been through some
Okay.
very significant life changes since that ceremony. And there's periods where it's kind of stressful
Of
but
course.
it's not
Of course.
the same level. And I keep thinking back to that, you're safe. And I've come back to that over and over again. You're safe, you're safe, you're safe. And it's true. It's just your body didn't feel that for so long
Yes. Correct.
didn't feel that for so long. And
Yeah.
and now with again significant life changes, it's been like, you know what? This is going to work out. As you said in some of your other interviews, I know that there's a purpose. I'm going to be where I need to be at the time that I need to be at. I don't need to try to control that. I can
Wow.
breathe through this and it works.
Wow.
And all my friends have noticed a significant change and have commented on it. So they're like, you look different, you act different. And there's a small core group that I've shared that I've done ayahuasca with, and they're like, where do I go? How do I sign up?
Now, you said you made some significant decisions after ayahuasca. Was that in an attempt to reduce stressors and triggers and stuff like that? And you finally had the, I don't know, the courage maybe is the right word, the courage to make those changes? Or was it just one of those things of like, hey, I need to change this and it's time to go? Was it easier? Because I know you said, let me just back up a little bit. I know you've said before you've changed jobs because of toxic work environments, right? And that was sort of, you were sort of forced to because you just couldn't handle it anymore. This time,
Mhm.
though, did you make those changes because you just decided that you wanted better and you weren't necessarily forced to? You sort of had the option to choose, or did it feel forced like it did before? It was just easier to go through. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does make sense.
Okay.
And I was already exploring leaving that work environment because
Okay.
it is,
Okay.
and I still know the environment has not changed. The opportunity for me to leave had not presented itself prior, but it did shortly afterwards. And so I took that opportunity. But the transition to the new job, the transition away from the old one was significantly better and easier to handle. The experience has allowed me to enter into this new role in a more and better capacity, just in a more present, in a more, just a better capacity. I don't know. I don't know that there are actually words to articulate it.
I mean, it sounds like the Gabor Mate thing about the energy of trauma transformed the energy of life. You're just spending
Yes.
less energy just trying to keep yourself together. And now you can just use that energy like normal people do and just do things. You know, you don't have to think about, oh my God, what if X happens again? You just go do it. And then usually X doesn't happen anymore. So it's like taking a backpack off. You're not doing it. You're not working life with like weights on your back anymore. You're just sort of going through it. And obviously you still have stressors and you still
Yes.
have stress and all those type of things, but you don't have those outsized reactions, let's just say, anymore.
Yes, I think that's it exactly. And I think the backpack analogy is really good because I've been able to shed that weight. Everything is different. And it's still, I marvel at it. I'm still very aware of it, still very cognizant that if
Yeah.
I was in this situation, a year ago, my reaction would have been X, and
Right.
it's not. It's just not there.
Right.
It's a little
Right.
strange.
Okay.
It's not a bad strange, it's a good strange.
Because you've lived your
Yeah.
entire life the other way, or almost your entire life.
Yeah. No, I'd
Wow.
say the entire life. Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
hmm
So, what do you think that there was anything, and I know the answer to this, but I'm asking anyway. Is there anything you could have done differently to shed this before you had, or was this just exactly how it was supposed to go? And then you're just where you're now where you're exactly where you're supposed to be.
I think that for me, I had explored every palatable option.
And it sounds like you needed to explore every palatable option before you even got here. That's just the type of person you are. What? Oh, have you done holotropic breathwork since?
I have not. I looked for a practitioner, but they're really hard to find nowadays. It's a very lengthy certification process.
Okay. Okay.
And I had done quite a bit of internet research to try to find someone, and I've never been able to really connect with that group again. I'd be open to it. Um,
So what do you do for self-care now? Do you have a meditation practice? Do you have a yoga practice? Do you have a walking practice? Do you lift weights? Like what do you do for just self-care just to, exist?
yes. Yeah, because we all need that, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I absolutely still do meditation. I'm not as dedicated or as structured as a lot of people who do medication are. I'll do it in the car or I'll do it, while I'm sitting at my desk or walking.
Okay.
Do a
Okay.
lot of walking and hiking and just being out in the world. To, I need a creative outlet. So for me, being creative is also a form
Okay.
of self-care.
Okay.
having lovely conversations with beautiful people is a lot of my self-care. Just having that
Okay.
human connection is really
Okay.
important for me.
All right. So I'm looking for recommendations from you. Say someone had struggling with generalized anxiety for whatever reason, right? What would you tell them now? Would you say, hey, you need to go to ayahuasca? Or would you just tell them about ayahuasca? Would you say there's a bunch of other options? Like if someone came up to you and asked for advice, what would you tell them about how to try to treat whatever is going on with them?
I think there's a lot of different approaches,
Yep.
and depending on what they've tried before, some of these things are going to work. Ayahuasca is a commitment, time-wise, financially, and emotionally and spiritually. It's a commitment. And I think I would have a conversation with somebody about if you're open to this, this is what it is, this is what it looks like, this was my experience. You might want to listen to your podcast and hear from other people what their experiences are and see if this is something that you think would benefit you. I have a really close friend that I know that the experience would benefit her and she wants to do it. She's just not at a point in her life where she can make that commitment, but I know it would be hugely beneficial for her. And we've spoken about it. She's very open to it and is planning on making the trip down there as soon as possible.
Now, it sounds like you have a one night credit. Would you ever be open to going back? I mean, not right now, but like, is it something that if, life started to creep up again, you started to have a little bit of reactions or whatever else, would you go back and do this again?
I think about that all the time. I really do. I will absolutely go back. I don't know when.
Okay.
It is not something that I feel like I'm called to do right now. For me, I believe that. I think it is a calling that has to happen. And when I get that again, I will go.
A little tangent here. Has your idea of like spirituality changed since you've sat with this? Like, I know I was a staunch atheist when I started all these things, and now I know religion isn't, churches are a little weird, but like there's clearly something in that medicine that is more powerful than me, that type of thing. Has that
Mhm.
shifted or changed your view on just on spirituality in general?
I think it may have shifted a little bit. Like I'm more open to sitting with people who have spiritual beliefs that are not in alignment with mine. I'm more open to hearing their perspectives and appreciating that that's how they get their fulfillment and their spiritual needs met.
So you're basically it sounds like your window of tolerance has increased. I mean, that's a basic thing increased massively in some aspects, but in general, it's increased. You can tolerate things that you can't control or can't normally don't agree with or whatever else, just much, much easier without having like an outsized reaction to it. That's
I think so. I think that's a good way to put it. Yeah, absolutely.
wow.
And I
Wow.
was a pretty tolerant person, but it was those things that I couldn't really control, those things that stifled my ability to grow, or move
Yeah, you
within
were.
this world.
Yeah, you were
Yeah.
definitely intellectually tolerant, but your amygdala is separate from your higher thinking, obviously. So you were intellectually tolerant, but your body just didn't have the capability to handle all of that energy. And it seems like now it might have that. So, are you better at your job now? Are you better at life now? Is it just easier?
I think I'm better at life and therefore
Okay.
better at my relationships, better at my
Okay.
job, better
Okay.
at being a
Okay.
human being.
Wow. Wow. Is there anything that I have not asked that you really want to share with either me or people who are thinking about this or anything like that you just feel like you just need to tell people?
Yeah, I appreciate you allowing me to share my experience very much. I think that this is something that is a tool for things that you may be carrying that you haven't been able to address in more traditional settings. I don't know that it's for everyone, but it was definitely something that was hugely beneficial to me and truthfully life changing.
That's This is a really cool story. I gotta say the hypnosis thing and understanding about your birth and connecting all these type of things and then being tested the next day after ceremony is just, it makes you think that ayahuasca is a pill you can take and then feel better. But we know that's not true because to get to where you need to get to ayahuasca itself, you need to do a bunch of things just to be able to get there. And then once you got there, it was easy because you had done all this prep work ahead of time. Without that prep work, who knows what would have happened? If you had sat down with Aya at 25, who knows what would have happened?
Right.
That's fascinating. That's fascinating.
Hmm.
Do you feel proud? Do you feel
Yeah,
proud of yourself for all this?
I do. Yeah. And I keep thinking, like you're saying, why didn't I do this when I was 25? And it was like it wasn't even a concept at that point in time.
No,
It wasn't
no.
even there, and I don't know that the experience would have been as healing in many ways. And I had done a lot of things, like you kind of said, I'd done a lot of things prior to that that fall within those traditional boundaries and traditional methods and practices. Hypnosis is on a little bit on the edge, and breathwork's on a little bit on the edge. And everything was hugely beneficial in many ways, just to have the experience. But this was the one thing that really changed all that was remaining.
Okay.
Whatever
Okay.
was there that was residual and couldn't be changed or touched was assisted by ayahuasca.
That's fantastic. If there was one thing you could tell someone to focus on, either pre-ceremony or post-ceremony, just one thing, not at the expense of all the others. I don't mean that. But there's one thing that you did or shifted or did differently, whatever else. What is there one thing you can think of to tell someone to like, hey, this was really helpful to me? Was it meditation, journaling, breath work? Is there anything that you could recommend like that?
I think setting a very clear intention going in, and that was something somebody told me, was you need to really sit, and I guess that's part of that meditation prep, really sit with yourself and think about what is the clearest intention you can communicate. And so mine got boiled down to very specific, words and language. And I got everything that I had asked for, and probably a little bit more.
It sounds like it. That is really great. Okay, I've had a fantastic time talking to you. Thank you for sharing this story. That's cool. Definitely a unique story. I appreciate it. So, Dianna, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate all of your time.
And thank you so much for having me on. It was really great to listen to you, and to have heard all the other stories of the people that you have interviewed has been really amazing.
Thank you. This is fun. All right. This has been Tyler Hurst of Microdose Yoga with Dianna, who works somewhere and does something. Thank you all so much for sitting with us, and we will see you next time.
I get why people numb with drugs and alcohol. Like I don't think for me, I had fully appreciated why people would choose that route. I knew they did. I never judged them for
Yep.
that. I
Yep.
applaud sobriety, but I had never been in a period of my life, and I had had many other tragedies, but I had never been in a period of my life where I wanted to numb myself so completely for extended periods of time, to where I fully understood why people do that now.